Hey everyone, welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is the only podcast where we watch every single episode of G.I. Joe Real American Hero, the cartoon, in sequential order, and we comment on it mystery science style. And I'm so happy this week to welcome back a guest. He was a guest on last year's episode. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it was the one where Serpentor, my favorite things, where Serpentor goes back and gets his the favorite belongings from when he was formerly Genghis Khan and formerly this emperor and formerly that emperor, and it was a really, really great episode, and I was very happy to have welcomed that guest from that episode, Mr. Davis Grayson, back to Joe on Joe to talk about a new thing that he just released that I think all of you will enjoy. So Davis Grayson, welcome back to Joe on Joe.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate you having me back on board. It has been so much fun listening to this podcast. So I want to say thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Yeah. I went just in refreshing which episode we did. I was like, oh yeah, man. Was it was a few of my favorite things was the name of it.
I want to say, because that was also the one where we thought that the bat, we see the
my favorite things. That's what it was.
Yeah,
right?
My favorite things, because remember we see the bat actually look up and we think he's developing a consciousness or something.
Yeah, which might come into play in something we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, but that was such a great episode of the show, and I think today's episode that we're going to watch, which is from the DIC show, it is called That's Entertainment. I think it's also a fun episode. It's a little silly, and we're going to talk details about it a little later, but we're watching That's Entertainment from the DIC episodes. However, today you're here to talk about a new venture that you're doing. Last time we talked about that you do really excellent Instagram photos, like action figure models and stuff like that. Your handle is Springer_2017. And you, of course, as a Joe on Joe member, you're Peacemaker, the naval investigator. But now, on top of all that, we can add you're a Kindle's Worlds author with your new short story called Tales from Peregrine Base. Tell me all about that.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. The idea for Kindle Worlds came out, I think it was like 2013, 14, 15, something like that. It was a few years back. And this past G.I. Joe convention in Orlando, there was a Kindle Worlds panel, and three of the authors that were actually writing in the Kindle Worlds, Don Ma, Wes Ferguson, and it's Bill Nedrow. Bill Nedrow.
Okay.
And the reason why Bill is so cool about his story is his character Stiletto was the one that won the contest to become a figure that they had previous years before that. So very, very cool. So they had a panel, and they wanted to actually do what they call a legacy trilogy, and they wanted to span it over like 3 decades of G.I. Joe. And they wanted to ask ideas from the fans. And so people were given ideas, and I just said, hey, we have the October Guard, but we never saw a member of the October Guard who was from Cuba. And they all go, oh, that's an idea. That's a real good idea. So didn't really think anything about it. A couple of weeks later, Don actually IMs me and says, we want to help create a team, so we want you to help us out. So create this team. So I got to create the team, which I thought was really cool for the October Guard. And I was very blessed to be able to have all three of them give me ideas, and I let them know what was happening and everything. And I just told them, I said, I want you to save one character, so I want to write about him. And they did that.
That is really, really, really cool. So tell us, for our readers, our listeners who may not be familiar with what Kindle Worlds is, can you give us a rundown exactly like what that concept is? And I think, isn't it, it's coming to an end soon, right?
It is coming to an end, unfortunately. So, and I lucked out because I was on Facebook one day and I saw one of the Kindle Worlds writers, Troy Osgood, post saying that Kindle Worlds after May 17th was no longer submitting any new stories. And I felt a little bummed about that because I was like, oh, I really wanted to get this story done because I had to finish a few last bit of things. And I was trying to do volume 1 and volume 2 together. so I could release them like 1 week after the other. Unfortunately, volume 2, it's not going to be able to be released, but I'm going to find a different medium for that.
Sure.
So after July 17th, I believe, it's either 16th or 17th, they will no longer be available. So you want to make sure that if you want any good G.I. Joe stories, because like I said, there's a lot of good writers. Justin Bell's another one. Jim Beard, who has done Tales of the Planet of the Apes and done many other great stories and such. He's actually one of the Kindle World's writers as well. You want to be able to, there's about 300 G.I. Joe stories.
And wow, I didn't realize there were that many on there. And so in big picture, can you walk, because Kindle World's, my understanding of it is it's a repository for fan fiction, for people to be able to sell their fan fiction through Amazon. Is that an accurate description of it?
I believe so, because they have different genres from all over. I mean, I think even Exo Man of War, I'm not too familiar with that series, but that was one of them that they could actually do. G.I. Joe and different romance, fantasy, all sorts of different. So you had certain guidelines you had to follow, and you had to, adhere to those guidelines. One of the funniest ones was Snake Eyes in no form or fashion could be a Yankees fan. So
that's hilarious.
I thought that was pretty funny.
So is that so like how do you know that? Is that Hasbro like working with the community? Like, you know what I mean? How does this come about? And then do you know why is it closing down? Is it Amazon? It's just not profitable for them, or there's too many? Are there problems with like the IPs, or do you know anything about that?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, there's always speculation for anything. It could be because it could be various things. It may not be profitable for Amazon. It could be whatever the case may be. I mean, but it is shutting down, unfortunately. However, the cool thing about it is you get to keep the stories that you buy. So that is
great. You just wouldn't, and would you, once they're no longer for sale, they also wouldn't be searchable, right? You're not going to be able to find them on there, and there will be a sign just saying like not for sale, right? It's just. Do you know anything?
I think so.
Okay. So what that means is you have until, you just say July 17th?
It's either July 16th or 17th is when the final day.
To go on Amazon and buy these, load your Kindle up with this stuff, and then, read it at your leisure as you go along, because there's a lot of really good stuff. I enjoyed your issue quite a bit, volume 1.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see what you how you do volume 2, volume 3. Do you know who wrote the guideline for G.I. Joe? Was that Hasbro or?
I don't know. I think it may have been in conjunction with Hasbro and Amazon, because there was certain guidelines. You couldn't do any crossovers. You couldn't do anything with any other intellectual properties or anything. So you had to be very careful about what you could and could not say.
Well, even within that though, you do some deep diving in your story, and I like it a lot. So walk us through Tales from the Peregrine Base as a teaser. It's basically the October Guard. They're going into Cuba, right? To investigate an old Dr. Venom laboratory.
Right. Well, they have answered a distress call from the liaison of the Cuban October Guard team known as the Movement.
Got it.
And so once they arrive over there, they wanted to see what the disturbance was. And it's on a small inlet island. When I was looking at Cuba going, okay, where can I do this? And I was trying to actually pinpoint it on Google Earth going, okay, where's a cool little place to actually do? And I said, I'll just create something, but I wanted to have something in that immediate area.
Awesome.
So, and there's been known that there was Flashpoint, Diego Perez, who was the last surviving member of the October Guard's equivalent team, the Movement of Cuba.
Now, so was he a creation from the other Kindle Worlds author from that conversation you had about why were there no Cuban, or was he an actual figure?
Yes.
So he's wholly from Kindle Worlds.
He's wholly from Kindle Worlds. I actually created a figure from him. I meshed a couple of pieces together, and awesome. I used it was a modern era figure, so I just wanted to
Well,
create him.
that explains why, as I was reading it and enjoying it, of course. But I was like,
Oh, okay.
I don't know who this guy is. You certainly absolutely give enough information to understand. Oh, he's a member of the Cuban October Guard and this and that and the other. But in my brain I was going, oh, he must be a later GI Joe that I just don't know. I'm a dummy. Now, you're also the lead character that you use. I think this is pretty interesting. You were telling me about the lead female on the Crimson Guard is Volga, not
For the October Guard.
yeah, for October, yeah, October Guard. And it's Volga, not Diana. So, tell me about Volga.
So Volga was a part of a 3-pack from 1998, I believe. It was the Toys R Us exclusive, and I believe it was supposed to be Diana, but for whatever reason, it didn't come about. I don't know why. I don't know what the deal was or anything. So I just said, oh, this would be a cool figure to use because if you look very carefully where the date is, it's 2011 with my story.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Nedro, who writes the third book, his is in 2016. And he mentions Diana and he mentions a few other things. So, and because when I was talking to Bill was like, oh, I didn't realize yours was going to be at this time. This is how I was doing mine. And I said, don't worry. I said, this is how it's going to be fun this is the creative process of putting in the story so everything fits together, hopefully. So
I've pulled up the file card from our friends over at yojo.com for Volga, and I think it's fair. So their explanation is Volga could conceivably be a unique character, but her real name and file card matches Diana. And it seems to me that whoever was putting the file card together thought, well, we can't name her. Her name is Dana. Her name is Dana. We can't call her Dana, so let's give her a nickname, therefore creating two different characters entirely. That seems to be the obvious, you know what I mean, just of human nature.
Right.
How did this come about? You're a bunch of marketing people sitting around a table. Well, there's no other character whose name is Jack, and then his code name is also Jack. So let's make up a name. Therefore, they birthed Volga. But I love that fans took that and ran with it and said, no, different person. Entirely.
And well, see, I wanted to have her as a different person. So, and I wanted to create my own character. So I said, okay, what can I do to still have a strong female lead? Because I wanted her just to be just an all out,
yeah,
a great character.
She's great.
And I wanted to make her just a little bit younger than Diana, but I wanted to throw in like little similarities going, I thought there was no other women in the October Guard. Contrary to popular belief, this is who I, have all those little phrases and everything, because Diana is mentioned in the in my story and in Bill Nedro's story as well.
So now there's another character that you use that I actually don't want to spoil it for our listeners, because I really want you to go to Kindle Worlds and get yourselves a hand on Tales from the Peregrine Base. So I'm gonna ask this. There's a spoiler that they rescue a character from the G.I. Joe team. And we're not going to say who he is, but I thought he did die.
Yes.
Are you the first person to bring him back, or no, you're not?
No.
Where was he previously brought back?
He was brought back by Larry Hama.
Oh,
in the new continuity. Well, not new continuity, but the continuation of the old Marvel run.
The IDW / Marvel run.
Right.
Larry. So he was brought back in like ish 156 and beyond.
Yes. So,
okay.
I don't remember which episode.
That's all.
Yeah.
That's all. That's a tease. That's a tease, listeners. If you know who we're talking about, then you're like, oh, well, I got to read it. But yeah, that's awesome. And did Larry's story leave him in the position we find him in your story?
No, because I was trying to actually have it take place before.
Okay.
And in volume 2, you would understand.
Fair enough.
Oh, where does he go?
Awesome.
And because I will tell you this, and not to spoil anything, but one of the characters in Larry Hama's IDW run sees this character again and says, "I thought you were dead," and he said, "It's above your pay grade."
Got it. Got it. Which is also used in your story.
Yes,
Yes, yes, yes. Now, so your story then from all this conversation, this takes place in the comic book continuity, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to actually have it where I could have it take place virtually anywhere, where it wouldn't mess up any continuity, going forward. So I was trying to just make it its own, but if you wanted to put it in a timeline or anything, you could do that too.
Well, it's delightful. So congratulations on it. It's a whole lot of fun. Make sure you go to Kindle Worlds, look up Tales from the Peregrine Base, Davis Grayson, get your hands on it. I think it's $2.99. Is that right?
Yeah, it's $1.99.
Yeah, I mean $2. Come on, get it, read it, you'll enjoy it. And then
yeah.
and then we gotta find like a website or something to host the follow up. There's got to be other like fanfic websites, right? That
there has to be. And from what I've been told, there is a Kindle Worlds panel that is at the last GI Joe convention in Chattanooga coming up soon, and there is some news going to be happening there, but I don't know.
Awesome. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, I don't know the news or anything.
We're recording this on like the 10th of June. And so the GI Joe convention is, I want to say it's the 26th, right? That week? Or is it
21st, 22nd? It's right around Father's Day.
Yeah. So I think
right before Father's Day.
Right. So this episode will air the week after the convention. So if you're hearing this, whatever happened at the convention, here's our answer. It was amazing. I can't believe they announced that. Did you see? Oh my God, I was so amazing. More importantly, they're going to continue the convention and it's going to be in my hometown. What? I'm so excited about that. It's going to be awesome. Yeah.
And I think a lot of the Kindle Worlds writers for GI Joe, I think a lot of times they were just writing. Some of the ones I've talked to that they wanted to write because it was enjoyable. It wasn't like to make money off of it or anything, but it was, all of us have done it before growing up, played in the yard, all creating these characters. And that's what I wanted to do. I actually had a friend of mine ask me, he said, "So where's the GI Joe team?" I said, "Well, they're not in until the very end."
Well, it seemed like they would take the center stage in part 2.
Yes, they would.
Seemed like that's what you were setting up. But I like that was the choice on your, because it's a lot of focus on Cobra and some improvements there. Now you slipped in your character of Peacemaker.
I did. And
which firmly cements this podcast in the continuity. Wait a minute. Then that means Deep Dish is a member. You made me legit. You made Deep Dish a legit member of the G.I. Joe comic book.
See, there you go.
That's amazing. I love it. It's so great, man.
I have to say, when I didn't think it was actually going to happen, because I never heard back from them and it was on the last day. And I just said, you know what? If it doesn't happen, this is the one thing I want to always tell and encourage people, that if you see something that comes up and you say, I want to think about doing that, just get on it right away. Just do it, because I just happened just to type in on the search bar for Amazon. I just typed in Tales of Peregrine Base, and all of a sudden 3 days later, I was like, oh, it's there.
You're absolutely right about that. If you have something that strikes you, don't think about how hard it would be to do. Just start chipping away at it. Everything you think about, everything you may want to create or have a little creative puck. It doesn't always come to fruition. Sometimes there are legitimate obstacles to getting something done, but if you just start chipping away, you then this mental backlog that you have of things you've accomplished versus things you want to do, it just grows bigger and bigger, and then eventually your accomplishments gets larger than the things you want to do, or even more inspirationally, the things you want to do get more expansive because you've accomplished all these things that you previously thought were hard, and then you're like, well, no, I did that. So if I did that, then sure, I could totally do this. And I think that's a real important lesson. It's a real important lesson, and not just not just creatively, like because not everyone's a writer or artist or podcaster, broadcaster. Not everyone's got that gene, but it could be, man, I really gotta honestly, I gotta paint the garage. I gotta go. I gotta get around to working on my car, or I want to learn, how to take apart an engine or how to change the oil on my car. Like those little things. Eventually, you're like, you do it, and then it wasn't that hard, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's something I can do. Or I want to build my own PC. That for me, that's something for years I've always, every time it comes time for me to get a new computer every few years, I go, man, this is the time I'm going to build my own PC, and I never do it.
Yeah,
and I never
absolutely. I learned this past year how to lay floor for my
awesome.
Living room.
Yeah, and when you first started, it went slow.
Yeah.
And you were nervous, and you were like, "Oh gosh, what if I?" And by the time that floor was down, you were a pro. Like you felt so comfortable, and now you probably feel really great about it, like accomplished and proud, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the way I look at it with this story. I was like, if I did not do it, and if I would have just kept putting it off, because the way I was getting the inspiration to actually write it, I went on a few hikes. And I went to the different state parks here in Florida, and I was going, okay, I've got the story. It's all mapped out in my head. But until I actually put it to paper, it's not going to work. And so I started just writing down an outline. And then from there, I just started just typing. And then all of a sudden, I have a 60-page, short story or novella. And I thought, can I go any further, or do I need to stop right here? So...
in like 1998, 99, like hot off the success of Clerks and all that stuff, I had an idea for a script that is basically Clerks in a movie theater based on my time working in a movie theater. And I fleshed it all out, and it was all mapped out, and then I did nothing with it until 10 years later. I finally sat down and said, I'm just going to write this script. I don't know if anyone will ever do anything with it. I've shown it to a few people that we've done read-throughs that people enjoy it, whatever. But I was able to get it out, and now I think that opened up this block. Now I've written multiple scripts, and I know how to write screenplays and all this stuff. But I sat for 10 years on this one script that I love, and it's this personal story that is now something that, it's done, it's accomplished. Like that, I got it out of me. It's a thing. It's a thing that exists now, and now I can open my brain up to tell other stories, and I have. It's great.
I completely agree, because I know, looking back, I'm going, if I would not have wasted time or procrastinated, those things where I could have been, already done volumes 2, 3, and 4. Because I even asked Daryl DePriest at one point after the panel last year, I said, hey, I know we can't combine Transformers, but do you remember this episode of Only Human? Is there a chance I could do maybe a couple of those characters? And he said, I think you'd be all right if you use X. And I went, all right, I think I might do that.
Got it.
So
I know we can't use Transformers, but what if a vamp just happened to morph into a robot? We didn't call him a Transformer. He doesn't have an Autobot insignia. But it just becomes a Jeep that all of a sudden walks and talks. Is that okay? Can we do that? Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't know if you've read any of the IDW shared universe or anything.
Oh, but, yeah.
I mean, I probably am the minority here, but I do love seeing Autobots, G.I. Joe, ROM, Micronauts all together. I mean, it just seems like it fits.
It totally fits. I think they've done a really good job of it. I think that strangely, the Joe team has been spread out a little too thin with it. I think they thought that having them as this, which it makes sense to have them as the spine, but they kind of got lost in the shuffle, ultimately. But we know that the Transformers and Joes were in the same universe. They totally were. And then to make the Transformers tech like the wellspring for ROM and all this stuff makes complete sense. And I love it. Like I love all the concepts. I love it. I hope that they're rebooting Transformers. I don't know if that means they're abandoning the shared universe or whatever. I just hope we get a stronger, IDW version of the G.I. Joe team come out of it. That's what I want.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. And have Mask be a sub team of GI
Yeah,
Joe.
well,
That's what I've always thought.
Mask has always just been, it's the combination of Transformers and GI Joe. And
Oh,
if you're
absolutely.
going to put them in that world, then yeah, they took Transformers tech without the AI. They put it into their IROC, and then they slapped a GI Joe guy in the cockpit. Like, yeah, absolutely. That makes
I,
that makes more sense than anything else in the world.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of that stuff, it was out there, but I just enjoyed it. It was just a lot of fun.
It was. It really was. And I'm an old school Rom fan, so just to see Rom back in play makes me very, very, very happy.
Well, if you remember the old Marvel, and I don't know if it was the Marvel UK or Marvel, but you remember Death's Head,
Yeah.
who was like 30 feet tall, as
Mm-hmm.
tall as a Transformer, got reduced in size by someone in a blue box. And then all of a sudden he appeared. He took Death's Head back and left him on top of the Baxter building. And now he's in the Marvel universe.
Who was the person in the blue box?
It was number 7,
But like, was it?
Doctor Who.
Oh, it was
The
Doctor.
Doctor.
Oh, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Funny. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, because Death Head was he's a big UK guy.
Yeah, and then I think the 4th Doctor and the 7th Doctor appeared at a couple of times.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, I know in Marvel, because Marvel owns the idea of the Space Knights, I think, or the they own Marvel still does stories with Space Knights. They were a part of Annihilation and all that stuff, and all the secondary knights that were created during the original run were owned by Marvel. It's just that Rom and the name the Dire Wraiths were still owned by Hasbro, but the design of the Dire Wraiths are owned by Marvel. Like, it's like a weird, like, there's certain elements that were created for the comic book that Marvel still does use. And so whenever you interact with the Space Knights, one of them in the Marvel universe, one of them always mentions like, our great shining hero that that has fallen, and they're talking about Rom, but they never say his name. And they're like, there's always a line about like, he was so special. Now let's move on with our great thing,
That's
right.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, today's episode of this show, Joe on Joe, is we're going to watch That's Entertainment, and it is fantastic. It ages General Hawk. If the episode where Hawk was retired to the beach made him feel old, this episode makes him really old because he's just a massive fan of Bob Hope and Bing Crosby.
That's the first thing I thought when I saw the show.
Oh, it's complete. Yeah, it's completely Bob Hope and Crosby, and that means General Hawk is 65 years old. 65. Now, even in the 80s, Hope and Crosby, yes, in the 80s, I think Bob Hope was like 80 at the time, so he was still old at that point. Yeah, the Hope Crosby road movies, they were in the 50s. So you've got General Hawk being this massive fan of movies from the 50s. So that would have been 30 years prior. Well, actually, 40 years prior, because now with the DSC stuff, we're in the early 90s. So that is, let's compare that. That's in now. That's me being well, you know what? Oh my God, I'm really old. That's me being a massive fan of movies from the 70s. And I am a massive fan of movies from the 70s. Yeah. So this is okay. So I love The Godfather. Who doesn't love The Godfather? This is if I'm General Hawk today, 42-year-old General Hawk going, hey, they just kidnapped Al Pacino and Robert De Niro.
Yeah. or they go, oh my goodness, Harrison Ford has been kidnapped.
Yes.
Or anything.
Yeah, Al Pacino and Harrison Ford have been kidnapped by Cobra.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. So I take all that ageism back. General Hawk's a young, vital man who's absolutely got his finger on the pulse of modern entertainment. That's the statement I'm leaving with today.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're gonna get into it, and we're gonna watch That's Entertainment. Are you ready, Davis?
I am ready when you are.
Sweet, man. Before we hit play on that, I need everyone to go to Instagram and check out Springer_2017. You're going to see Davis's wonderful Instagram stuff. He does action figure, poses, takes them out into the wilds of the world and sets them up in nature. They look really great. Go to Kindle Worlds, look up Tales from the Peregrine Base, and act fast. There's probably only about a month left by the time you hear it, maybe only about 3 weeks left in order for you to get your hands on this. And while you're on the internet, make sure you follow me at Joe on Joe Pod. If you want to be a guest on the show, I'd love to have you on. If you're a fan of G.I. Joe, send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. Also, I'm running a Patreon, and on our Patreon page, we do a Patreon exclusive podcast for G.I. Joe. It's called Joe on Joe Illustrated. We break down every single issue of the G.I. Joe comics. So we don't pick and choose. We don't just get all the hits. We don't do, here's issue 21 for the 5th time. Here's our thoughts on this, here's our thoughts on Snake Eyes origin issues. Oh, no. We do every single issue. We do it in order, and we go page by page, panel by panel. So I can't imagine anyone else has done this on this. I can't. Have you seen anyone doing it?
I think there may be one. It's called G.I. Joe Headcast or G.I. Joe Real American Hero Headcast.
How dare you? How dare you? How dare you? Well, no, that's great though. And they go issue by issue.
I think what they're doing is an issue, and then an episode of the animated cartoon series.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I find that pretty cool.
Yeah.
And it shows. I love to listen to different points of view from people to say, oh, okay, well that makes sense. Well, that makes sense because, I mean, that's one reason why I wanted to actually get my story out talking about the October Guard. I always thought they were just a cool team, and they were introduced as early as issue 6.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, how crazy is that?
Yes, they were. We covered that on Joe and Joe Illustrated. So go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod. For only $3, you get full access to every single one of those podcasts, and you can help support the show. You can help support the show for just $1 a month, whatever it is. We love it. We appreciate it. And I love that someone else is doing it. That's great. I'll have to check that out. I think I've seen Headcast on social medias, but I'll check out what they're doing. It's fantastic. I try not to actually listen to other pods that much because I don't want to steal. I don't want to be influenced unduly, but I celebrate everyone doing it. I think the more the merrier, because the bigger we can get the word out about G.I. Joe, I think the more Hasbro would see that there's an interest to revive it and keep it vital. I think it's in a very precarious position these days. So I love it. I love seeing the chatter, and I hope it's not us being in a Joe bubble. I hope that we're actually getting more people thinking and talking and, just getting some chatter out there, because I'd love to see more Joe product.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, it's a shame that the club is ending this year, because I've always loved their concepts, because this year the theme is Slaughters, Marauders, and the Python Patrol.
Yeah, both introduced in the show at the same time.
Yeah, and the Python Patrol, I just love the color schemes. I love them using like different fringe characters that Trigger and Lightning were from 2011, that they were not foreign, it was Argentina or Brazilian exclusives that they were used, and they were repaints of other figures, but they brought them back, and they were only released there. They weren't released anywhere else. Cool. And everything, and the club actually brought them into the modern era.
Oh, that's great. So, well, you used the Python Patrol in your story.
I did. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to, where it looked like they were a little undercover with some stuff, and so Python Patrol was just an obvious choice. And I used Hotwire, the Cobra Bat mechanic, and Copperhead. I mean, you can't go wrong using Copperhead.
No, you can't go wrong using Copperhead. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into watching That's Entertainment. And here we go. So we were saying earlier that you're a fan of the DIC opening, but I don't think you didn't watch these episodes, right, when they were out?
I watched a couple, but not that many, because it was on at like 6 o'clock in the morning where I lived at the time.
Yeah. But these openings are great. They really highlight the toys. Like it's as good a spotlight of the vehicles and the figures that were available at the time as I could possibly imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have every single vehicle, every single figure wave that was going on during this time. Every character is being looked at. I mean, even the Buzz Lightyear Hulk is one of the coolest ones.
Yeah. I just noticed that and maybe if listeners, if you know this different, please correct me. The parachutes they use in this opening, they have a bird symbol on them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that the first use of a eagle / hawk / bird for the Joe logo? Because you know how they've done that in more recent years with the live action movies. Someone smartly realized, hey, Cobra has a logo. G.I. Joe doesn't really have a logo. G.I. Joe has their name with the stars and stripes, but that's not much of a logo.
Right.
So they've used that bird. You know what I mean? Like the logo I'm talking about, the bird one.
Yeah.
There are birds on those parachutes. Could that be the origins where they first started trying to get some kind of eagle / hawk kind of branding, maybe?
It could very well be. Could very well be.
Just wait till
Now, I will tell you, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but I looked on yojo.com.
Yes.
There was no reissue of Lady J, but she is in the cartoon.
Oh, yeah. They just don't mean dumb, but they simplified. That's the right word. They simplified her design. There were no women in this era of G.I. Joe. There was, Jinx was the last one. And then if you go through the Joe figures, there's a reissue of Scarlet as a ninja. And that's kind of it. They went hard into all dudes. So the fact that Lady J is in this episode and on the DIC show is a huge plus. And she's just simplified her look. She doesn't really have a different look. They just kind of simplified it, Well, this is great. So they open up and they're watching a road trip movie. Actually, well, they weren't watching Road Trip to Gorky. It was Road Trip to Afghanistan or something. Yeah. But it's the Bob Hope, Bing Crosby stand-ins, and they're watching their movies, and it's actually
the treasure is ours.
It's Hope and Crosby. But the Crosby character, he's not beating his grandchildren. He's really he kind of sounds a little bit more. He's got a little bit more of a Dean Martin kind of swagger going on, but it's definitely Hope and Crosby. And if you're not familiar with Hope and Crosby, it's Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, of course. And they did a lot of road movies, so it was like Road to Bali, Road to Singapore, I think was one of them. And they were just road trip movies. They kind of set the template for road trip movies, They were two dudes that would get into trouble. Road to Morocco. That's the one I was thinking of. Road to Morocco.
That's right.
I think that's one of the bigger ones. And they would just go on these adventures, and the two rode to Rio, and they would get in some kind of hijinks and some kind of trouble, and it would just be an excuse to
So you think Cobra was after the map generator?
have a vacation and film a movie. So we learned that Hawk and Kremov, who is Red Star, but they don't call him Red Star, so he's Kremov. They're massive fans of these guys. And we learned that these guys, or that Cobra is...
Keep both eyes peeled, troops. There's no telling what
Cobra's on
those
alert.
snakes may
Let's
try
put it
next.
that way. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So because Cobra's on such high attack alert, Sergeant Slaughter puts everyone on basically 24/7 guard duty, which is going to wear them very thin. Their nerves are going to get frayed, right? Mm-hmm. And we see here,
and they're protecting the MacGuffin device, which is for a deep space satellite.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
And the weeks go by. We see the calendar go by, and they're on alert, and so things are going wrong because now they're not paying attention.
It was accident. I'm sick of.
And I find it funny they never call Captain Kremov by his code name of Red Star.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before. I don't really have an answer, but I got to think it's some kind of copyright thing. It had to be some kind of, just for honestly the same reason that Hector Ramirez was changed.
Sergeant Slaughter, I want my
that other episode
Cobra,
too.
not each other.
Something,
Morale
whatever it
is
was.
low,
There was
sir.
a
They need to let off steam before the whole team goes stir
Gonzalez.
crazy.
I forget what his other name was.
Right.
Even though in the animation it was the name Hector Ramirez was actually animated, but they called him something completely different. maybe because he was technically a Sunbow creation, so maybe at some point in the Sunbow stuff, there is a Red Star that someone had animation copyright on, so they just called him Kremov.
Could be that.
So here we go. We meet Jackie, who is Bob Hope, and he's doing his USO tours now. Bob Hope did a ton of USO tours.
Yeah, he did.
That was his thing. He was Mr. USO, and by all accounts, as good a thing as it was, and I don't want to take anything away from, he was out there helping the troops and doing great stuff, and his legacy, I think, does continue to this day. Apparently, the USO tours was just Yaha time for Bob Hope.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard him talked about on like things like the Gilbert Gottfried podcast and stuff, where apparently Bob Hope would go on the USO tours to just ship every single girl that he went with.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Never even knew that.
I don't mean to disparage a man. I truly, it's a different time and different things. But yeah, apparently the Hope USO tours were Yaha time for Bob Hope.
Wow. So I mentioned about the Buzz Lightyear reference with General Hawk.
Yeah.
Somebody actually recently did a custom that turned that General Hawk figure into Buzz Lightyear's colors.
It's like painted him up
looks
blue
amazing.
and white. Oh, really?
Yeah, looks absolutely amazing. I loved it.
That's pretty great.
So what do you think about this Cobra Commander in the battle armor?
It grew on me. I had him as a figure, and even as a figure, it bothered me. I think the design is a terrible garish design, just on its surface. I don't know how that comes through and someone approves it. It is just wildly garish, but it makes sense to put him in battle armor.
Right.
But why this with such odd angles? I don't know. What do you think?
I was first introduced to it by the comic books.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was one of the Fred series, Crimson Guards, that actually helped him out and got it and everything. And eventually, as everyone knows, spoilers, Cobra Commander shot in the back, and Fred 7 or 8 take over as Cobra Commander.
Yeah, and being in the armor helped disguise that it wasn't really Cobra Commander.
Yeah, and if you look on Instagram or look in different
we're
places,
going to commercial. We'll be right back. Today's file card features on the G.I. Joe communications expert codenamed Dial Tone. His file name is Jack S. Morelli, and his primary military specialty is the radio telecommunications. His secondary specialty is the infantry. He's from Eugene, Oregon, and he's a grade E4. Dial Tone built his own crystal set when he was only 10. By 14, he was part of a CB network and had his own ham station by the time he was 16. Dial Tone made all his own equipment, buying parts with quarters he earned bagging groceries. He saw the Army as a means to furthering his education in his chosen field and quickly found that instead of a stepping stone, it was a goal in itself. Manning a radio in the field wasn't just passing time, it was a job with a purpose. Quote, "One of the scariest things that can happen to you out in the field is to lose contact with your base. That means you are alone. There's no artillery support, no airstrikes, no medvac, no extraction, no nothing. The cavalry ain't coming until the man with the radio tells him to." I was a big fan of Dial Tone. He was my meat era of G.I. Joe communications guy. I had Breaker, but something about Dial Tone really sung to me, and I think it was the movable microphone on his backpack. He had that backpack that kind of arched over his head, I'm assuming to get better signal because it kind of went up and out. And then the microphone would swing down over his face. He also had that snappy beret. He and Flint rocking the berets. Looked good with a nice mustache. They've done 11 Dial Tones over the years. Dial Tone's got a lot of play in the figures. In '86, he was reissued as part of the Special Missions Brazil Force, it was part of the Toys R Us exclusive repaint series with Claymore, Leatherneck, mainframe, and wetsuit. And he also had a good-looking figure. In that one, he had red pants with a black undershirt, a brown overshirt, and a green web belt going over his chest. The original Dial Tone had a really good and unique look because he had this green teal with a tan shirt and black pants that made him stand out when you line him up against the other Joes. And in the mid-2000s, they actually turned him into a female, which was later retconned a little bit, and they said that was actually his sister, Jill Morelli. So, Dial Tone fans, don't worry. He's still out there. He's still keeping it down, rocking a mustache the entire way. I'm a fan. I love that his name's Dial Tone. Kids don't even understand what a dial tone is today. It's like you should call him busy signal. And so, Jack S. Morelli, Dial Tone, we salute you. You were saying?
I was saying that the Fred series, if you look at some of the pictures that you post now, you'll see the Fred figure's head on Cobra Commander.
Oh, like they'll customize it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty great.
Yeah, someone did a General Hux and put General Hux's face on that, and it looked just like the Fred
General
series.
General Hux has very similar speaking patterns to Cobra Commander. Let's be fair. Those Star Wars movies, he screams and behaves not unlike Cobra Commander.
Yeah, that's
There's
true.
some similarity there for sure. So on the show, Cobra Commander has kidnapped Bob Hope, Jackie.
Yes, he has.
Yeah, and he's going to impersonate him, and we're going to get a little bit of Cyrano de Bergerac going on. And Cobra Commander is now wearing a Jackie mask outfit. Although what's funny is they draw him literally like 5 inches taller than Jackie, which is weird because it's like if they are saying that obviously Cobra Commander can't change how tall he is, but if they're gonna try to fool us into thinking that he's the same guy, why are you drawing him 5 inches taller standing right next to him? That seems a weird choice. And
it does seem pretty crazy, but that's that suspension of disbelief,
right?
Too, so.
And we know that they were only focusing on characters that were popular at the time, that were not even popular, but literally for sale at the time.
Yeah.
You have Zartan on the team. You have Xandar on the team. Why is Cobra Commander going undercover?
So did you
And
hear
why
that the
are we
Cobra
not
library
pulling
burned
out
down and all the
Zartan?
books were destroyed?
That's
I
what
guess
I don't know.
because since he has that battle armor, he has more confidence now.
He's been
That
working,
makes sense, right?
Yeah, he's been working on his impersonations. This is wonderful though because Jackie is feeding Cobra Commander lines, Cyrano de Bergerac style,
Right.
and Cobra Commander is so stupid that he's repeating all the lines that Jackie gives him, and he just literally quite like he lived up to it. It's great. Like this is a great scene. I really think it's hilarious. And I think Cobra Commander is actually liking the role. I think he's liking being someone who's appreciated, you know?
Oh yeah.
Miss Diamond.
And it's funny how he's wearing Chuckles' shirt.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
He totally is. And here's Red Star has all their movies on VHS, and he's going to get autographs.
Could you tell me just
And
please one thing?
Fiona is seducing Colonel Kremov.
What is like
And all Colonel
work
Kremov's
with
interested
Jackie
in
Love?
is working with Jackie Love. I think he's got a crush on Jackie Love, is what I'm saying. Who can blame him? Jackie Love's a magnetic personality.
Yeah, if you look at Captain Red Star's file card, it says he's a captain of the October Guard, but there's only one other member that appears in the Dick episodes, if I remember correctly, and that was Big Bear.
Oh yeah, well, Big Bear. Have we ever seen him with the October Guard? Wasn't he always just only ever on the Joe team? Like he was a give to the Joes. Like they were like, hey, the wall is down. Let's partner up and be friends. But have we ever seen Big Bear on an October adventure?
Well, if you go to Tales of Peregrine Base,
available today for a brief period of time on Kindle Worlds, you'll see him on an adventure. You're absolutely right. Now, I do want to point out that this part of the plot, this is stolen from the movie. This is them cannibalizing the Falcon plot, the exact Falcon plot from the movie, which was a little insulting. Like we just did this in the G.I. Joe movie, where a female Cobra impersonates a girlfriend of a Joe, and she breaks in and steals something. That's the movie plot, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Find Jackie Love.
By the way, that line right there, "Find Jackie Love," that's a reference to, I gotta imagine that's a reference to that 1970s cop show. What is it? Get, you know what I'm talking about? But the female cop, Get.
Good work, General. What now? We let the snakes take us back to their base.
Get Christy Love. Get Christy Love. Yes, that's it.
Oh.
Christy Love was a cop show in the 70s, and the tagline was like, "Get Christy Love."
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, Get Christy Love, 1974 and 1975.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. That was a reference to Get Christy Love, which is really obscure and freaking hilarious. They would put that on a G.I. Joe cartoon from, 1991?
Oh, yeah. And did you notice that Jackie Love's mask that Cobra Commander had on, when he takes it off, his battle armor head
Yes.
is still on?
Yes.
Amazing special effect.
It's so... That's what kills me. That's the part where I'm like, God, how cheap are we here? How cheap is this animation? You can't figure out a different way to do it. You know, have him duck his head behind something, something, right?
Yeah.
Come on, guys. Come on.
I would have been happy with just like a ski mask or something,
Now
just
these
a
are
smaller mask.
these are like the Crimson Guard Elite. Is that their name?
Crimson Guard Immortals.
Right. Which is, I like seeing them. It's pretty great.
Yeah, they are actually pretty cool. And I think there was an update Modern Era to them, and they're actually pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
Crimson Guardsmen.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have the Shadow Guard, where it's the Crimson Guard figure, but they're all in black
Nice.
instead of red.
Nice.
Looks absolutely gorgeous.
Nice. He just said you're about as funny as a screen door on the space shuttle. I don't think we had the Defiant yet, but I would have loved to have him just go back and say, you're about as funny as a screen door on the Defiant, and just leave it at that.
Oh yeah,
Let people
I know.
think, what's the Defiant?
Unfortunately, we never did see the Defiant.
No, we never do. Now, this is classic Cobra Commander. He gets a little bit of success, and he absolutely just pisses it away. Like, all of a sudden, he thinks he's the funny man. He thinks he's the talent. He thinks he's the reason for success. And that is the downfall of, like, every dictator. We're going to go to commercial with Jackie Love in trouble. Hey, listeners, I'm not sure if you've heard the news, but Joe and Joe has started a Patreon, and I'm inviting you along for the ride. Go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and check out my page. Right now, there are 2 opportunities for you to help support the show. You can choose to be a grunt or a viper. Grunts get access to all the Joe and Joe episodes and early access to new episodes as they're created. Vipers get all that and access to my all-new spin-off podcast, Joe and Joe Illustrated, where I will be breaking down every single issue of the G.I. Joe comic books, page by page, in the deepest dive you'll ever hear on G.I. Joe. So go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and see what's happening over at the Fort Wadsworth Motor Pool. We'll see you there. He is suspended over a shark tank with his actual co-star lady friend over a bunch of sharks.
Hey, it'll be a snowy day in the Sahara before I play second banana to some guy who sounds like a tricycle tire with a leak.
That's a great line. And so this is also great, Cobra Commander, and all the list of various crimes and terrible things he's done. If he's ever brought in front of the Hague, they're going to just straight up have footage that he shot himself of him murdering someone.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So they could always say, like, hey, you were in charge of this international terrorist organization. He'd be like, well, in charge, schmarge. Like, what does in charge mean? And then they go, okay, well, all that aside, here's 35 millimeter camera footage of you lowering a man into shark tanks. Okay, yeah, that was me. You got me.
So we see General Hawk with the helmet on now.
Yes, very rare. It's rare. And he looks like he really looks like yes, Buzz Lightyear, but contemporary to the time. He looks like a Centurion. That's the Centurion armor.
Yes.
Yeah.
The G.I. Joe Collectors Club is actually going to be releasing a General Hawk in their FSS wave.
Really?
Like this.
Really,
it looks really sweet.
Good. I hope so, because this look has the potential to look good, but I don't think they necessarily achieved it. It's an odd, bulky, weird look. And his haircut, Hawk's hair color has been problematic from the start. Can we talk about Hawk's haircut?
From blonde to dark brown.
From blonde to dark brown to now jet black, the older he has gotten.
Yeah.
That's not how hair works.
Well, at least he didn't lose it. Hey.
Well, hey, it's two bald men right now having this Skype chat. I think we know what we're talking about. That is not how hair works, people.
Yes.
It does not work that way.
Hawk to Krimov. Do you read me?
So,
I
that was so crazy.
Clear. Welcome to the set
So,
of
General,
Buster's Last Stand.
they're standing on the set of a movie, but we don't exactly know it. So all we see is Hawk hanging out in front of a campfire, and in the backdrop, it's, there's wilderness and mountains, and they're animating it, so it looks as normal as it would look. And out of nowhere, the sky just rips open, and Krimov comes busting through, which is, I think that's wonderful. I think it looks great, but we don't know it yet, so it's just shocking. Did Krimov just break the fourth wall on a cartoon? Like, what just happened?
I know, right?
Captain Krimov, we've got to save
Ooh,
the
that's a
map
good look. The
generator.
detail on Hawk right there.
Yeah.
That was actually really good. And it looks
And you
like,
are right. The Centurion.
Yeah.
I like that feel. I like that vibe. I always liked the character.
I
thought it was
always
a
liked
cool looking
Centurions, man. I always liked the Centurions. I thought that show was awesome. And I really liked the second season when they introduced like the 3 extra dudes.
Yeah.
So you had a little more variety in it. I don't remember any of their names, but I just remember that they had different, like I identified them by like the color of their outfit, the red and green and yellow. And then they introduced a dude in like blue and brown, I think, or something. And like, oh, it's great. Centurions is amazing.
I just remember Jake Rockwell and Ace McCloud.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yes. Oh, this is great. They're doing a bit from one of Jackie's movies. Fantastic. And they just punch him. Here's the deal. If I'm ever kidnapping someone, not saying it's going to happen, but I got to be honest, I'm not saying it's not going to happen. And that person starts to do some type of routine, whether it's telling a joke or a sleight of hand or patty cake. The first thing I'm going to do is take 5 steps back and absolutely point my gun at his head. I'm not going to be fascinated by what he's doing. I'm not going to be curious by what he's doing. I am going to step away and point a gun at him and say, as soon as you're done with your little routine, then we'll talk. Now, this is hilarious. This is what I'm talking about, where Cobra Commander was literally making evidence of his murder. They were filming the whole time. So now we get the Joes watching General Hawk cry about the death of Jackie. And they're laughing at General Hawk.
What? That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said about me.
That's
I only
awesome.
say it because it's true.
They're mocking a man.
Resigning my commission.
Oh, and you know what else? This is another thing this episode. General Hawk, his voice pattern, and I know it's Hawk. It's he's doing the voice. It's got a lot of Adam West in it.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of Adam West in General Hawk.
Not to mention the best version of the old eeny meeny routine I've ever seen.
Hey, man, the old eeny meeny routine. Hey, I love it. now hold on a second. My wife's back home. I'm gonna go shtup this co-star of mine. Hey, we're gonna support the troops and support the Jackie, if you know what I'm saying.
General Hawk,
And then we get the end for our episode at the same time as the end on the movie that they're watching, which was I like this episode a lot.
It is a fun episode for sure.
It is, right? It's super charming.
I just love the fact that during this time, was this 1990, 91, something like that? During this time, it's the whole line of vehicles. It's everything. I mean, you see the General, you see the Avalanche, you see the Dominator, you see the Retaliator, the Brawler, I mean, the Rage.
Yep.
So many cool vehicles that were there that I just think in my mind going, wow, which one did you have? Oh, I had this one. I had this one. I had this one.
Well, according to the fantastic guide that I use a lot on the show, Now You Know, the Unauthorized Guide to G.I. Joe by Lars Pearson, this episode aired on October 18th of 1990.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. It was a fun episode.
And you know what? Yeah. The Baroness, the lady, the girl in this, she's supposed to be Dorothy Lamour. I don't think we mentioned that yet, but that's great. Yeah. So he needs that, obviously Bob Hope. But yeah, she's supposed to be Dorothy Lamour, so that's very cool.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
very, very cool.
Listen, I like it. It is a little silly, I think, but I think this is akin to The Viper is Coming. This is that kind of episode. You know,
yeah,
it's just a funny little premise, and the characterization they give is fantastic between Red Star and Hawk, that they have this thing in common, especially at the time of bridging the cultural gaps. You know, because Red Star would have come up in Russia, General Hawk obviously American, and that they both grew up loving the same dudes, and it's speaking that entertainment can cross whatever political differences you may have or whatever socioeconomic conditions they have. You can find a similar ground with someone and go, oh yeah, oh my God, I love Bob Hope too. I love Jackie Love. It's so good,
Absolutely. Yeah. I still think though that this is not a continuation of the Sunbow. I think it's an alternate world.
Reality. I do. I think so too. I really do.
It kind of makes sense because you see Grunt a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we were laughing about it earlier, but the jet black hair on General Hawk.
Yeah,
that's not how I could see it going from like blonde and young to kind of browning up when he put on the bomber jacket. Like he just grew his hair out and it kind of got brown. That's what happens to blondes, but it doesn't go jet black. And maybe of course he could dye it, but also Low Light went from being a blonde, curly-haired blonde guy to having jet black hair in this, even facial hair. So you're telling me Low Light does? Too. Yeah, Low Light does like just for men on his beard. Like that's. It's so funny. There's certain things that are so simply answered, and the answer obviously, he dyes his hair, right? But then, for me, as a viewer and just consumer of entertainment, my brain goes to, but that's not how people are. People don't do stuff like that. In other words, I'll use the example of going back to the terrible Batman v Superman, but that movie, when you have Lex Luthor with a full head of hair all movie, and you get to the end of the movie and they show that he's in jail choosing to have his head shaved, right?
Right.
So that means you're telling me every day for the rest of his criminal career as a criminal super genius, he wakes up in the morning and shaves his head? That's not how people work.
That's true.
It's not.
You have to wonder about that.
Yeah, he would have a constant 5 o'clock shadow, but that's not Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is full on bald. That's his look. So you can't just say he dyes his hair or he shaves his head. Humans don't work that way. If you want him to look a certain way or be a certain way, like for using the BVS example, you have to have it be a traumatic thing. He got hit with kryptonite or got hit with whatever, fill in the blank, and his hair just fell out, or he naturally just went bald.
Right.
But the answer absolutely cannot be he chooses to shave it.
That's true, because wasn't there an episode, not an episode or a comic where Luthor he gets hit and that's how his hair
back in the day they said like in the Silver Age they established it was more of a jokey Silver Age thing where he was an experiment he was working on. Superboy, the experiment was starting to blow up and smoke out, and Superboy, who they put him living in the same, they said in the Silver Age, they said he grew up in Smallville with Superboy. Then when Byrne revamped it, they kind of said, that really is a little silly that the smartest man in the world would grow up in the same town as Superboy and never know that it's Clark Kent. So they just got rid of that. But then when Smallville came around, they kind of reintroduced it and said, yeah, he did spend time in Smallville as a kid. But the original Silver Age story was he was working on an experiment. The experiment was starting to smoke out and blow up. Superboy rushed in, put the experiment out with his cape, and rescued him. But the fumes that were created caused all of Luthor's hair to fall out. So then, in that classic Silver Age thing of, you made me go bald because something I worked on backfired, I'm going to hate you for the rest of my life. We were buddies, and they were friends before this. But you just made me go bald? Well, guess what, buddy? It's on. It's on until the day I die. Because now I'm bald. And that was the Lex Luthor story, But there's
That
a way
is pretty funny.
It is pretty funny. But there's a way to do that if you're doing a modern retelling. If you want Luther to be bald, you can't have him shave his head. And so here, like on this show, sure, if you want to say it's the same General Hawk that was originally blonde with the Joes in a green shirt and then went to bomber jacket brown, he can't go. Don't tell me he dyes his hair black. Just don't.
Yeah.
Don't tell me he does that, and don't tell me Lowlight dyes his hair black. I don't believe it. They're not. They're not that vain. Anyway. But who am I? I'm just a bald guy trying to find his way in the world, Davis. That's all. That's all I am.
I hear you. I hear you on that.
Well, listeners, thanks for listening. This has been Two Bald Guys Talk G.I. Joe. We
Is that the sequel to your show?
It's my third podcast. It's going to be Two Bald Guys on G.I. Joe. We're only going to talk about the hairstyles. Yeah, coming 2020 is all the hairstyles. Every single... Our mascot is Gung Ho, of course. He's going to be our mascot. But thank you all so much for listening. Davis, thank you for coming back on the show. It's really great to chat with you again. Remember to go to the Amazon Kindle Worlds and look for Tales from the Peregrine Base. Give it a great review. Read it, buy it, download it. You only have a couple weeks left before it all goes away. Hopefully there is some kind of announcement going forward. But check them out at Springer_17 on Instagram. And Davis, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words. And I'm glad you enjoyed the story.
You got it, my brother. Now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.